Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's SCRS webinar. We're just going to wait a second or two here just so that all of our friends can log in. We have a number of people who are registered for today, so we're excited to bring this group together for another great webinar. So just sit tight here. All right. Well, as a few other people are logging in, I do just want to go over some quick Zoom housekeeping items. I'm sure many of you are familiar, especially for those of you who have been coming to the series week after week. But I just want to let you know that we are interested in your questions. We deliver these webinars for you. So if you do have questions, we want to hear them. So you can use the Q&A functionality down in your toolbar. Please type that question in, and we will be entertaining questions toward the end of today's session. Speaking of today's session, at the end, we are going to have a post-webinar survey. For those of you who have been with us before, you know that as soon as I shut this webinar off, you will receive a survey in your browser. Make sure to look at that survey and complete it if you are looking for contact hours. If by chance you missed that survey, an email will be delivered to you tomorrow, about 24 hours from when we conclude, and it will have a link to that survey. Please complete that again if you're looking for contact hours. We will be issuing certificates for today's attendance within 4 to 6 weeks. If you have any questions on that, you can always contact us at myscrs.org. Speaking of myscrs.org, we do want you to make sure that you're taking full advantage of your membership. And if you're not currently a member, you can do so at the site. So please go to myscrs.org to find out more about that. All right, well, it looks like we are seeing a good number of you who are now participating, and we just want to make sure that you know our faculty disclosures are in order, and you can see those here. We are now going to begin to move to our session for today. So Ralph, I would ask you to share your screen, and then we can do some brief introductions for our team today. Excellent. All right, well, you can see both here on the slide and in video our three presenters for today. I am happy to welcome Ralph, Gwen, and Sam from Refi Health and Merck. They are going to be speaking today about reducing site burden for oncology trials. This is something that I know every site out there is looking to increase their burden just a little bit so that they can be more efficient and effective in what they do. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Gwen.
Thanks so much, Dawn. My name is Gwen Oakes, and I am a program director at Merck. I belong to the Global Trial Optimization team at Merck, and I'm delighted to have an opportunity to speak to you today a little bit about how we're focused on reducing site burden in our oncology program. So our Global Trial Optimization team is a unique group at Merck. We support global clinical trial operations with global feasibility planning, as well as recruitment and retention planning. That happens to be my area of expertise. I started in industry back in 2010 at a niche recruitment provider and joined the Merck team in about 2013 as part of the GTO group. And we're really focused on ensuring that we're providing thoughtful and valuable recruitment and retention strategies to our sites. We saw an opportunity with StudyTeam to consider how we could reduce the burden of execution for our sites. And so we wanted to come to this group today and talk to you a little bit about that. Ralph, you can advance through the next slide. There we go. Thanks. So we know that reducing the burden of execution in oncology clinical trials is critical. These clinical trials are frequently complex in design, and we really want to ensure that our sites are focused on what's most important, and that is ensuring that they have the ability to spend their time focused on the patients who are considering participation in our trials, and not doing a lot of the manual, sometimes duplicative, and often complex work in providing administrative support back to us as a sponsor with respect to their pre-screening efforts. So when we think about recruitment and retention for our oncology clinical trials, we frequently try to think about things that really are fit for purpose and that are scalable. Our oncology program is one of the largest in industry. And so it's really critical for us to have a very strategic and scalable approach to the way that we implement recruitment strategies in oncology. One of the things that we think about, again, is how we can reduce the burden of execution for our sites. So again, they can make sure that they're focused on what's most important, and that is the critical care that they're providing to patients considering participation in our trials. Historically, we know that site systems don't communicate well with sponsor systems. This is a pretty manual effort with respect to how sites provide information into sponsor systems. And so finding a way to enable this workflow to become a more streamlined process is really important and critical in helping our sites to more effectively recruit and enroll on our clinical trials. Ralph, if you'll advance to the next slide. I spoke a minute ago about this manual process, and typically it involves sites completing a manual pre-screening log that is frequently an Excel-based log, and they have to do this for each individual study and then provide it back to the sponsor via their CRA, often via an email address, or sometimes via anecdotal feedback during CRA follow-up. So, you know, the ability for the sites to have a really sort of streamlined workflow with an Excel log for every single study is really inefficient, right? And so when we think about, excuse me, I'm sorry, I just lost track of my notes for a minute there. Ralph, I think, I'm sorry, thanks. Yeah, thanks. So when we think about how we can reduce that burden, we want to think about ways in which we can be more efficient and streamlined about it. You can advance to the next slide, Ralph. I think these two are kind of duplicative on each other. And really the point here is just to highlight the fact that the burden on sites really leads to low visibility for us as a sponsor, right? Because we don't have an efficient way in real time to be able to get those important pre-screening, that important pre-screening information from sites. You can advance the next slide and through this one as well, Ralph, thanks. And so, you know, when we were introduced to StudyTeam, we really found the concept to be interesting, because what StudyTeam enabled for a site is to have one streamlined solution that they would be able to enter all of their pre-screening data into. And then that solution could, if the site so choose, be connected to the Merck sponsor system as well, where we would also have an ability to provide some enhanced information on our clinical trial protocols. So we piloted the StudyTeam software in the oncology program. We started very specifically with our suite of prostate studies, which was a suite of 4 studies. And we thought, here's an opportunity to really not only test the system, but also to enable a more efficient workflow across all 4 of these studies for our sites. And so what we did here was really offer sites an opportunity to connect their StudyTeam for Site software to our Merck sponsor software. And what that did for us was enable some real-time pre-screening and enrollment information on our suite of prostate studies. It also enabled some cross-trial functionality, which was really critical in a holistic view. Ralph, you can go ahead and advance to the next slide. That's fine. It speaks to that sort of really holistic view that we were able to gain when we initiated StudyTeam for sponsors on the prostate program. And you know, importantly, it offers Merck as a sponsor an opportunity to see some de-identified data in real time, and having the ability to see that data and for sites to be able to share that seamlessly with us if they so choose is really critical to understanding how enrollment on our clinical trials is going. Ralph, I think the next slide maybe just highlights that opportunity for choice that is enabled through StudyTeam, which is really important. I think, you know, I saw a quick question come through chat with respect to how we were experiencing site uptake. And what I can share is that we started on this suite of 4 prostate studies in oncology, and we saw such significant site uptake across those 4 studies that we were encouraged to expand our pilot, not only via the data that we were collecting there, but also via ask of the sites that were participating on our prostate studies. Many of those sites were also participating within our bladder program, and they were calling the CRS and saying, hey, we're using this on the prostate studies. Could you turn it on for the bladder program as well? So we saw some really important and significant site uptake metrics as part of our pilot that encouraged us to expand our pilot. And ultimately now, and you'll hear from Sam in just a couple of minutes, we're looking at scaling to an oncology enterprise solution here with StudyTeam, because our sites are finding value in the ability to have this really streamlined workflow process. And here's just a little bit of anecdotal feedback from the sites. You can see that they really feel like the StudyTeam tool for sites and us as Merck enabling the StudyTeam sponsor system for them is really helping to facilitate those workflows. It's easing the burden of execution for their clinical trial recruitment efforts on our protocols. And we're really glad that we're able to partner with REIFI and also with our sites in order to help facilitate the important work that our sites are doing for recruitment of our protocols. One of the things that we noticed as well in working through StudyTeam is that there was some ability for enhanced functionality. We were creating, as part of our recruitment efforts, some Excel-based tools that we felt could provide some real value as part of the StudyTeam software. And so in partnering with REIFI, we went to Ralph and to his team and we said, hey, we've currently got these tools and we see a potential opportunity to integrate some of them into the StudyTeam software to further enhance our site's streamlined ability to be able to, effectively support their enrollment efforts for our clinical trials. And Ralph and the team jumped on board and said, yep, great. We see that same opportunity as well. And so at this time, I'm going to pass it on to Ralph to talk a little bit about some of the enhancements that we worked towards in order to help support recruitment for our clinical trials through StudyTeam.
Yeah, so thanks, Gwen. So everyone, I'm Ralph Passarella, one of the co-founders and CEO of REIFI Health, and I've had the good fortune of working with Gwen and Sam and others in the Merck GTO organization to implement StudyTeam, but also to really think about how we can leverage some of the principles underneath the StudyTeam platform that drove the development of StudyTeam in the first place, to really create more value for sites and specifically sites running oncology studies in partnership with Merck, but also sites, the industry in general. I think something that has been a really key driver in our partnership and in the Merck REIFI partnership overall is this sort of intuitive understanding and sort of fundamental or deeply held beliefs that exist within GTO at Merck around the importance of reducing burden for sites as a way to improve kind of trial operations across the board, so that to help give time back for a lot of the people who are on the webinar here listening to focus on a lot of the important work that Merck and other sponsors ask you all to do, and to give you the ability to help you in certain areas in trial execution. And so we started partnering together in the recruitment space and looking at pre-screening activity specifically. And that is one of the foundational components of the StudyTeam platform. One of the things that we focused on first at REIFI Health is how we can relieve some of that data sharing burden from sites, help sites do some of the recruitment and pre-screening work more easily, more effectively, and make data, really important information, visible to sponsors. And so we started partnering in that space, but the same principles that we used to drive the development of the StudyTeam platform and to drive the success of StudyTeam in that recruitment space also apply to a number of areas in the clinical trial. And so StudyTeam as a platform is kind of first and foremost a system that sites can use on their own studies across as many of their studies they want for free to manage patients initially focused on kind of recruitment, pre-screening, enrollment. But again, across studies. And then when sponsors like Merck activate StudyTeam as well, we take the protocol for each of those studies and bake it into the system, bake it into the site's workflow so that as a site, a research coordinator doesn't have to do as much configuration for a given study, doesn't need to go to quite so many places to get information about a study, and also to share information back with the sponsor. And so we're kind of connecting a sponsor's protocol with your workflow as a site. And that's kind of the fundamental, one of the fundamental pieces of innovation driving StudyTeam. The same kind of challenges, the operational issues that we see in the pre-screening space exist in a number of other areas in a clinical trial though. And so when we look post-enrollment, we see a lot of the same problems crop up or kind of inefficiencies crop up when we look at managing patient visits. And so you think about, as a research coordinator, you're handed a 60 or 130 page protocol as a PDF. You need to take that protocol, understand its schedule of activities and so many of the different pieces of information embedded in that PDF, and start to build it into the tools that you use to get your job done. So that means that, what needs to happen at visit 1, at visit 2, at visit 3. And then if a randomization visit occurred on, November 1st, when does visit 3 need to occur? When does the next visit? What is the actual window? And so on. And then that can vary by trial. And we're asking consistently, we've asked sites to do a lot of that work themselves to solve that problem independently. 100 different research coordinators solving it independently on the same trial 100 times. Or in the case of Merck and the GTO organization, sponsors will try to help sites and provide more tools that sites can use to do some of that work or to relieve some of that operational burden. And so what you see on the screen here are some spreadsheets that Merck builds, provides to sites as a tool to help with some of this kind of complicated visit and imaging timing calculation. And sites are kind of asked to use those tools and they're to help them get their job done, but then they need to build that into their own workflow because each site will have its own way of scheduling patient visits and tracking what needs to happen next for each patient and whether or not it happened. And so what we were doing at the time we were moving kind of from pilot to beginning to scale up with Merck, we at Reify Health were looking at, well, how can we extend some of these principles that we've baked into StudyTeam that have driven the innovation with StudyTeam kind of beyond enrollment, beyond the recruitment enrollment part of the process and help sites post-enrollment too. And so how can we start to take some of the burden that sites feel figuring out what needs to happen at visit 2, 3, 4, when visits 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on need to happen. Start to provide sites with some of that information more kind of at their fingertips. So again, it maybe increase quality, but also give sites the ability to focus on some of the trial delivery activities more effectively. And so we partnered with Merck to say, well, all these spreadsheets that the GTO organization was building and that we're distributing out to sites and as tools to use, let's actually bake those things into StudyTeam. Let's start to look, post-enrollment and have those be tools that sites can use. Sites were already using the StudyTeam platform to track patients there pre-screening, screening, enrolling, and then to track patient activity after enrollment. But let's start to formalize more of that. Let's take more of the protocol itself and start to bring the post-enrollment parts of a clinical trial to life in the site's workflow too. And so what you see on the screen here is the example of one patient. This is all fake data, I should say, really explicitly. But a patient where a site is looking to say, well, all right, I just conducted the baseline visit. What needs to happen next and when does it need to happen? And so in StudyTeam, sites could already go and complete pre-screening logs and look at inclusion exclusion checklists and do the recruitment functions. Let's also guide them through some of those post-enrollment activities as well. So it might seem simple, figuring out exactly when visit 1 should happen, given when the baseline visit occurred. That's actually really basic arithmetic that when you do it patient after patient, visit after visit, introduces a large number of kind of sources of error. And so if we can help sites reduce the likelihood of missing, of scheduling a visit out of window, or just having to even the cognitive overhead of having to think about that, we can make life easier for sites. And again, hopefully help them actually do their job better or more easily kind of as part of their workflow. And again, that's a big thing that we're trying to do with StudyTeam, is to say, let's go to the place where sites are already working, where they're already managing all of this patient activity. And let's bring more and more of the sponsor's protocol to the site, and instead of a research coordinator becoming compatible with 500 different systems, trial after trial after trial. And so that's what we've done in the visit management space. And StudyTeam as a system then is a place where sites can schedule patient visits across all of their trials, whether the sponsor is using StudyTeam or not. But then for Merck Oncology protocols, and increasingly the protocols of other sponsors too, sites have a lot of really valuable information kind of at their fingertips as soon as they start working on the study. And so that's what we've extended the work we're doing together, Merck and Reify Health, beyond the pre-screening, screening, enrollment part of the world, kind of into this visit management work. And there's a lot of work that Sam's going to talk about now that we're doing to continue to build on some of the foundation that we have in place to extend these same principles to other parts of the trial too. So with that, I'm going to pause and I'll turn it over to you and let you talk about some of what we've seen in implementing StudyTeam together, and also a little bit about where we're going.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ralph. So just to get started, my name is Samantha Bertel. I also work in global trial optimization at Merck with Gwen. I'm actually the project lead for our rollout of StudyTeam across our entire oncology program right now. And we're even in the process of starting to bring in some of our general medicine, infectious disease, and vaccine studies. So it's been quite exciting and also a very ambitious project rollout that we've had. Personally, I worked at a site actually for many years and I actually worked on the regulatory side of things in clinical research. And then I went back to school and became a nurse, had an opportunity to provide some patient care, the same kind of patients that are going into our clinical trials now. And now I'm back to clinical research again. And before I jump into the site response, I do want to just take a quick moment. We don't really have slides about this, but I just want to take a quick moment and kind of touch on what our internal team response has been. Because, as Gwen was saying, when we started this project, we really wanted to provide for our sites that was truly helpful to them and reduced their burden of executing very difficult clinical trials. And one of the sort of wonderful things that has come out of it, in addition to supporting our sites, is that our own internal stakeholders are now starting to reap all of these benefits. Our study managers and our clinical scientists are starting to see things that are helping them to actually execute and operationalize the studies on our end. Our CRMs and our CRAs are really finding, we're hearing from them how much this is greatly reducing their workload every single week when they were trying to collect this information from sites, sort through it, collate it, understand what was going on, understand where challenges were happening. One of our CRMs in particular told us that she spent more than 4 hours every single week working with this information. Now she spends less than 30 minutes. I mean, that's huge, right? I think we're all quite busy, and who wouldn't want back 3.5 hours every week? And then for our own team, for global trial optimization, one of our responsibilities when we're getting site ready and we're starting to get a clinical trial ready is that we were creating these visit and imaging calculators, those Excel versions that Ralph showed. And, looks fairly simple, the version that Ralph showed, right? What you don't see is all the formulas that are underneath it to make those Excel spreadsheets work. Each trial is unique. And for those of you who work in oncology, especially, I'm sure you know that those schedule of activities, those, the treatments, the imaging, the long-term follow-up that goes on for 3 to 5 years after treatment, those are quite cumbersome. It takes quite a long time to create those spreadsheets. And then of course, every time you have an amendment, those need to be updated. One of the beautiful things about this that my colleagues are loving is that Reify Health is now doing that for us. So they're creating not only the version that we're going to see that Ralph was showing a bit here, that's in StudyTeam, but they're also creating that Excel version for us, because we do provide this, we provide this software as optional to our sites. We're not forcing them to use it. If they have something that they use at their site already, or for some reason they prefer the Excel spreadsheet, that's fine. That's available to them. And like I said, for us, luckily Reify Health is creating that now. So we've gotten our own really positive, great responses from my own colleagues. And with that, Ralph, if you can move forward. So first, I want to start off with just a few comments from our sites. And, for those of you on the call who come from a sponsor, I'm sure you can imagine we don't see comments like this very often with the things that we provide to our sites, right? I mean, this is amazing when you think about how busy our sites are, we know how hard all of you work. And so being able to provide something that really eases that burden has been so exciting. As a nurse who used to work with patients, that comment in the middle where they talk about using Epic, which is supposed to be, one of the easiest EMRs to use. And if this person is saying that this program is even easier to use than Epic, to me as a nurse, that says a lot. Ralph, if you can move on. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of our results, that uptake and response. So, as Gwen mentioned, we started with a very small pilot of just our prostate studies in the US. It very organically grew into our bladder studies in oncology, because many of those sites that were using it in prostate were also participating in our bladder studies, and they wanted to use the program there. And then everything just kind of kept growing. And so over several months, that's where we moved on to all of oncology, and it really became something that we are now offering globally on all of those studies. And as we've been doing our onboarding, we now are to a point where we have 88% of our sites are opting to use StudyTeam after they see a demo. And I want to be really clear here. I saw one of the questions come through from the chat from Tom J, was asking sort of about what's the site reception, how do they feel about this? And the key thing that I think we have really honed in on is really helping sites to see that demo. From our point of view, originally we were saying, gosh, it's only 20 minutes, like, please see this demo, but we know you're all busy and 20 minutes can be a lot of time. So we've been working really closely with our CRAs who are helping the sites to sort of carve out that time. We're using some monitoring time, we're using those site initiation visit time, and we're getting that demo in front of the sites. And once they see that demo, we're at a point now where 88% of those sites want to use that. Our goal is to get that over to 90, and I am totally confident that we are going to get there. So it's been really exciting to see this grow over the last year. And then on the flip side of that, as Ralph was saying, sites it's free for them. They can use it on any study that they choose. It doesn't just have to be our Merck studies. And 93% of those sites have moved on, and they're using it with other Merck studies, or in any other study with any sponsor that they have. So that has also been really exciting to see, and we also expect to see that number to continue to grow. Next slide. So our next steps, as I said, we started this whole project, probably a little more than 18 months ago, but 2021 has really been the year that we have really sort of doubled down on this effort. And we have really, gone at it with bringing in all of those open oncology studies that we have. And now we're starting to bring in, as I mentioned, some of those general medicine, infectious disease, and vaccine studies. So we really have been just scaling very quickly. Reify Health has been an incredible vendor to work with to help us through that process. We have really just thrown everything at them, and they've rolled right along with it. So we're at a point now for all of the countries that we work in. We are currently partnering together in 41 of them, which is huge. We've had, I would say, a few, we get a lot of questions from our local teams in those countries that relate to like privacy, some legal issues, do sites need EC, IRB review, that kind of thing. And again, Reify Health has been incredibly helpful in helping us to work through with each of those individual country teams. And we have really been able to scale this project quite quickly. Next slide, please. So, this is one of my favorite things. As Gwen was mentioning, we sort of came to Reify and we sort of listed out all of these different things that we thought would kind of help our sites. And of course, as we move along, we discover new things that we think would help with sites. Reify has come to us and made suggestions, and we've really partnered quite a bit to really expand this partnership and really be able to expand what Study Team can offer for our sites and for our teams internally. So, right now we're already using those pre-screening logs. And as I mentioned, that's benefiting both our sites and our internal teams. We have those visit management calculators that Ralph was really showing. And again, that piece of this program I think is so slick. As someone who used to work for a site, it blows my mind every time I get to see that and I get to see how it works. It's so beneficial for our sites. Some of the things that we're working on right now, we have our own personal website, Merck Oncology clinicaltrials.com. When a patient gets to that website, they're able to see any sites that in the US that are participating in our clinical trials. And we now have a pilot going with several studies where we have linked our website with Study Team, and now patients, when the site comes up, when it says that it's participating in one of our studies, there's an extra little box there that they can click on. They fill out a very short information form, just some very basic contact info, and then their contact info goes directly to that site via Study Team. So in essence, patients are referring themselves to that site for this clinical trial. And we didn't really know what to expect from this. It was just a little trial, and I think within 3 weeks it exceeded all of our expectations. So it's been really exciting watching that grow, and I'm really hoping that we're able to continue to expand that out to all of our oncology studies in the US. We're also working to streamline some of that operational information for Study Team setup. So this is something that's been a continual growing process. We really started this whole project from scratch at the beginning of the year. We've implemented a whole program that we're using across our company, that we're using with all of our different stakeholders, and really taking a lot of feedback from our stakeholders, incorporating that back into the program. And it's been really wonderful to see these startup times with Study Team, how we've been able to get these to ramp up with each study sort of as we bring each one in. And then we're also working to enhance the ability of our sites to manage those long-term patient retention. This is huge for those of you who work in oncology, especially. I think you probably get this, right? Like a patient finishes their treatment and then they oftentimes end up in long-term follow-up for 3, 4, 5 years. They've got phone calls, they've got imaging visits, and it can be really hard, for the patient to kind of remember that they need to follow up with this stuff. And then also for your sites, we know that all of you are really busy. You're probably more focused on your patients who are in active treatment. And so we're working to create a program. We're working on a program right now that is helping sites to create sort of automated reminders so that they know to kind of keep, to keep on top of those patients, to know when those visits are coming up. And we've gotten some great feedback from sites also that they really appreciate that tool. Some of the future stuff we're working on that I'm also really excited about. I'm sure a lot of we're receiving a lot of questions and initiatives from the FDA about diversity, enrollment in clinical trials, focusing on those underrepresented populations. And so we're working with Reify Health as a way to better track that in real time. And then the last thing we're working on right now is giving those sites the options to, potentially track study subjects long-term. So in essence, we're looking at incorporating a watch list sort of into the pre-screening log. So it's sort of part 2 of your pre-screening log. And this is especially helpful for those studies that are not first line, when we're waiting to see if patients have previously had a treatment, maybe they've now had progression or whatever it is. I know we have several trials in oncology where we have to wait 6 to 12 months, you have to kind of keep an eye on those folks to see if they'll be able to come into the study. And this would be a really helpful tool to keep track of those patients. Next slide. All right, and with that, I just want to say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you, Ralph.
Yeah, and this was the, I think this is the end of the slides, and we can transition into Q&A here in just a second. I think I just want to underline or underscore something I said earlier when I initially talked through some of the slides that I presented. I think one thing that the Merck GTO organization continues to kind of advocate for and represent, and one of the reasons we're here in this forum, having this conversation with everybody here and sharing some of this information, we have this sort of shared fundamental belief that figuring out how to make life easier for sites and figuring out how to do the hard work to build tools, systems that are genuinely helpful to sites is critical to scale, to really creating efficiency in how clinical trials are run. And we have to do even more work than we've done historically, because trials are continuing to get more complex and focus on increasingly small patient populations, especially in oncology. And so as the number of protocols go up, the need for really helpful tools also increases. And so it's not just enough to kind of make up for a lack of the burden that we've placed on sites in the last couple of decades. I think we also need to go even beyond that to try to keep pace with the way new protocols are being developed too. And so I think we wanted to come to this forum here and share some of the work we do, because I think this is definitely the kind of the SCRS and all the work that SCRS does in the community to advocate for sites. Like that's the kind of voice that we want to be a part of, and also the kind of group that we want to make sure we're doing what we can to help sites, everybody who's listening. And then also, if you have thoughts for how we can help you more or better than we are today, you should tell us, because I guess you have a captive audience right now on the call here, at least, and we mean it. So yeah, so thank you all for the engagement that you've had, and also thanks to the Merck team, obviously, for being great partners and pushing this stuff forward. So maybe Dawn, with that, if you want to, we can move into Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, we have a number of questions, so great job on providing that level of content. Here is the first one. What internal resources does a sponsor need to implement a solution like this?
I'm going on mute. Gwen or Sam, I will let one of the two of you.
And Ralph, I was trying to take myself off mute so that I could answer that question for you. So as I mentioned, we implemented a pilot here at Merck through our group called Global Trial Optimization. And I know across industry, there are many sponsors who have similar groups. At Merck, we're a little bit unique in that our group supports both global feasibility planning and recruitment and retention. My experience in the past is that there are some other sponsor organizations that typically those two groups sit separately of one another. At Merck, we sit as a combined organization, and that's one of the things that I so value about the GTO group here at Merck. And so implementation for the pilot was really driven through our team, which has the unique ability to sit within our study teams or our clinical trial teams, and we liaise with not only our clinical sciences and study management colleagues, but also our regional colleagues that are working out within the countries to implement operations for clinical trials. So it really was truly a combined effort. Largely project management was driven out of our organization with respect to the pilots, but truly it required the collaboration of not only our clinical sciences and study management colleagues, but also our regional colleagues out in the country countries in order to implement. And we've also found through the course of implementation that we've been able to facilitate some really effective collaboration across those 3 cross-functional groups. And the more education that we've been able to provide along the way to each of those different organizations here at Merck has been so beneficial in effective implementation and in enabling us to really, as Sam mentioned, sort of decrease those study startup timelines when we're implementing at an enterprise level in oncology. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Gwen. We also have another one. Tom, who's in our audience, asked us a question, and then we also have a few others who asked a similar question. So I'm going to wrap those up together here. Why are some sites opting out of using the solution? What's the pushback to not using the solution? And in terms of numbers, what are we seeing? Is it we see a lot of sites who are pushing back? Do we see a lot of sites that are opting out? Can you give us a little context on that?
Sure, I'm happy to take that one if that's okay, Ralph. So specifically at Merck, actually, so far it's been very few sites that flat out opt no. We had a little bit of a challenge in the beginning, I think, with COVID because our sites were we were all so overwhelmed. So even in those instances where we originally had some opt out, mostly related to COVID and resourcing related to that, we've had a lot of our own CRAs come back to us and kind of say, you know, I really think that maybe the site didn't quite understand the program. I didn't quite understand the program in the beginning. Do you mind if I go back and I talk to them about it? Can I try to set up that demo? And in every instance where they've done that, where the CRA has had the opportunity to sit down and work with Reify and the site and get them that demo, every single one of those sites has then wanted to use StudyTeam. So the very few number of sites, and I would say it's literally on our oncology studies of, you know, 150 to 200 sites, we're seeing less than 5 sites probably each that are flat out opting no. And for the most part, those are like very large teaching institutions that have some sort of software already. So I would say for the most part across the board, that's been like the biggest reason. You know, we haven't seen anyone flat out say that they don't like it, right? It's more just that they have something else they have to use at their institution already.
Great. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Because we have more questions. So if you feel it, okay, good. We got another one here. How does the solution determine when the next visit needs to occur?
It depends on the protocol. And so for a lot of non-oncology protocols, a randomization visit, the timing of the randomization visit will set the visit windows for kind of all subsequent visits through completion of the study for a patient. For oncology visits, they're often cycle-based. The subsequent visits are tied to the timing. So, you know, if we're looking at a protocol with cycles, cycle 3 day 1 dictates the visit window for cycle 3 day 15, or perhaps cycle 4 day 1. And so within StudyTeam, one of the things that we've spent time doing in StudyTeam is creating the infrastructure to account for those different possible outcomes. And then we also need to account for different arms within the study and different sort of treatment journeys for an individual patient. And so can be highly protocol specific, but effectively what we do is take input from the protocol from the sponsor that says, here's how, you know, this particular visit in this specific protocol and the specific arm of the protocol should be guided. Here's what determines the window for it. And then we have the ability to bake that into the application for that protocol for the study.
And Ralph, I have a follow-up question on that. So how is the tool used for competing protocols? Can you respond to that?
Yeah. So the sites can add their own studies at any point in time. There are certain features and functionality that are configured when a sponsor connects with a site. And that functionality either is like a site has to configure it themselves if a sponsor isn't using StudyTeam, or it's just not available because we need sort of sponsor engagement for some of the functionality to be available. So in the case of competing protocols, for example, sites can add their own protocols, can configure a good chunk of a protocol into the system themselves or with the help of Reify Health. And they can manage patients across those protocols. We've done a lot of work to make it easy for, say, an oncology coordinator to consider the same patient for multiple studies, either in parallel. So three breast cancer protocols at once, let's say, or in series. So if the patient doesn't qualify for study A, then let's consider the patient for study B. If not B, then study C. So those are, without, if we don't have a demo to pull up here, we could at some point illustrate how that works. What we don't yet do is help a site see kind of merge IE criteria and help a site see kind of across all the different protocols exactly which is the best for a patient without some work on the part of a research coordinator, let's say. That's one of the things we're looking into.
Excellent. Okay. And then yet another. Can this tool be used to create site study budgets based on protocol activities?
Not yet.
Okay.
We have done a lot of work to understand how we're going to do that. That is in the TBD future, but it will.
And can I ask, this is a variation on the question, but as you are considering what that could look like, what are some of the features that are being considered? So our question is about managing invoicing and reconciling payments. Is that part of the consideration as to what might be on the horizon?
So there's, I think there are certain details that I'll hold off on speculating or sharing sort of at this moment, because it is a little bit farther in the future. We know that sites right now, so when you're doing the work to establish a budget and then to send invoices for the invoiceable items and then to reconcile what you have and haven't been paid for, that is a tremendous amount of work. And if for anybody who's from a sponsor, if you don't know how painful that can be as a site, I encourage you to ask a site and to have them explain it to you. It's really painful. And so because we're sitting at this interface between sites and sponsors, and because we have the schedule of activities within StudyTeam and so many components of the protocol, there is an obvious opportunity for us to make that communication between sites and sponsors easier as well. And so things like baking in a budget into the system itself, things like making it easy for sites to trigger invoices for invoiceable items in a way that's already connected to how sponsors work. Those are things that we're looking at. Those are things that we've talked to some of our sort of core user base and sites about. And so what we're looking at doing is figuring out how do we incorporate budgeting into the system and invoicing into the system to save time for sites in a way that's not just here's functionality, but that really is additive for sites and sponsors.
Okay, great. And then let's keep on that same idea of what it can do and how it can work. Does the tool work for trials outside of oncology?
Yes.
Okay, great. And how about in terms of region? Is it US based? Can it be used globally? What are you seeing there?
Globally, but I'll let Sam or Gwen weigh in on some of what, so globally is the short answer. And then I think it'd be helpful maybe from the sponsor perspective, I don't know, Sam, you've done a ton of work to drive that expansion, like the utilization globally at Merck. And so maybe talk about some of what you're seeing sort of regionally that could be beneficial for folks to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are definitely working globally. We are all over and using this program all over. I would say we probably see the best and quickest response as far as uptake and immediate usage is coming out of Latin America and Asia Pacific. And then, and with some nuances, I think there are some cultural considerations we've had to make, especially in countries like Japan and China and Korea. Again, Reify has been fantastic with working with our teams and really making sure that we're being really considerate of those different cultural components. I would say the US we've also done a great job there, but that's been a place where we've needed a little bit more of that CRA support. I think just because folks are so busy and we put there are so many tech solutions, right? But giving them this one specific tech solution, but once they're able to see that, they do want to use it. I think our biggest challenge for the most part has been some different countries in Europe, mostly related to, they have such strict privacy concerns. And our team, of course, is extremely concerned with making sure that we're checking off all those boxes and doing everything appropriately. So, the ReifI team has been fantastic with working with us, with working with our global privacy officers, with working with some of our other teams that are do involve sort of a lot of this privacy and EC and IRB approval aspects. So it's been a little bit slower in some of those places, but again, once we kind of get over that hurdle and we get our internal teams, once we've checked off all those boxes, we get them seeing how the program works, how it benefits them, how it benefits their sites, then we start to see that uptake. So it has definitely been a process that we're still working on, but I think that we are very hopeful. I'm very hopeful that by the end of Q1 2022, we will have all of our countries on board and everyone able to use the program.
And Sam, I can add to what you were saying there. I see Morgan's question is sort of two-parted in the request to understand opt-in versus actual site usage. And so I know you spoke during your part of the presentation about 88% site opt-in, and that is when we also consider those sites that are opting in based on an actual study team demo. In the instances where we don't have sites that are willing to view a study team demo, we see greater than 70% site uptake, which I think is still very impressive. And shows the value of this tool. We have assessed actual usage metrics, and when I'm referencing metrics that are about a quarter old at this point, because we're just getting ready to do our sort of third quarter review of metrics with the ReifI team. But when we last looked at those metrics, we were noting greater than 65% site usage of those sites that had opted into using Study Team, which I also think is extraordinarily impressive, particularly when you consider the fact that we're implementing in the oncology portfolio and the complexities of some of our clinical trials and some of these really difficult patient populations that our sites are looking to enroll on our clinical trials. When we perform feasibility and we assess that our sites might be able to recruit, somewhere between, 1, 2, 3 patients a year in some of these oncology protocols. You have to think about, what they're working with in order to input into the system. So we've been extraordinarily impressed when Ralph and I worked together at the initial pilot to set some KPIs. He was suggestive of some metrics that, the study team that the ReifI team was seeing based off of their interaction with other protocols. And I thought, well, okay, that's ambitious, but I'm gonna trust in the process, and I'm going to trust that you're setting metrics that are realistically achievable for your team. And in fact, I was very, very pleasantly surprised that those initial metrics that we set and that I may be asked to err a bit on the conservative side of, we sort of blew out of the water. So we continue to really be encouraged by not only site uptake metrics, but usage metrics with Study Team.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Gwen. And I think something we also didn't really discuss was that for those sites that, that do choose to not use Study Team, we have those Excel versions, and Study Team accepts and reads information from those Excel versions. So those same sites that are saying no can still share that information with us via these Excel spreadsheets that are then pulled into Study Team. So then on our end as the sponsor, we can still see all of that data in the same place, and that whole process is pretty automated. And and I think that anytime you're incorporating any kind of new software, even when it's done voluntarily, you have some growing pains. It takes a little bit of time to start to see that uptake. But again, like, we're working so hard with our CRA teams and our CRMs, and they're working very closely with their sites, and we are seeing that increase. We're seeing the program being used more and more on a regular basis, and really continuing to get that solid real-time data, which is really exciting because we've never had that before.
Morgan, I also see your question about single sign-on, and I don't want to neglect that question. So that is something that we are working on with the reify team. It's on our roadmap to work towards utilizing single sign-on, because we know, certainly at the sponsor side, I know how much I value having single sign-on across many of the systems that I need to work with. And I can only imagine the number of systems that our sites are working with across different sponsors, how valuable single sign-on is for them too. So it is something that we're working towards. It is on our roadmap. We are not there yet, but I know that's going to be a really valuable enhancement when we're able to get there.
Great, guys. And then I think we just have a question there about languages. Ralph, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yep. So let's see. So the study team application itself is English only right now. What we've done, the approach we've taken, because clinical research is so global in so many different languages, so many different participants, healthcare professionals, research professionals have so many different languages as their first language. We've taken the approach of saying our team that trains, onboards, supports sites will be highly multilingual. So we have language support kind of in time zone of where the vast majority of sites are located and in the first language of the vast majority of sites for the trials we support. We're consistently adding to that. And then we also have user guides and training videos, instructional videos that are in local languages of, again, increasing numbers of languages. And so we do think it's important, rather than take the approach of starting in the app. We've started with some of the supporting, the support team and the supporting materials around it, and translating those or making those available in local language for sites.
Excellent. Well, all, thank you so much for all of this great content, and thanks to the audience for all of the questions. We are about just a few minutes before the end of our webinar. So what we are going to do is we're going to thank our sponsor as well as our presenters, and make sure that you all know that this is going to be archived and available to you on the myscrs.org site. Also, we were talking about oncology trials today, and we do have the SCRS Oncology Site Solutions Summit coming up January 28th and 29th in Austin, Texas. So please visit us on the website and click on Summit so that you can register for that. We're also going to be shutting down here in just a few seconds. So remember, if you are looking for contact hours, you are going to want to hang on there and the survey will pop up in your browser. Well, Gwen, Sam, Ralph, thank you so much for everything today. For all of you guys behind the scenes that worked so hard to make this possible today, thanks to all of you as well. And of course, thanks to our attendees for being part of today's webinar. With that, I am going to shut things down so you guys can take that survey and then be on your way to your next meeting. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.